So Mike King, he is one of my favorite. I can speak English. One time I was in a homeland and somebody said, "Where are you from?" I said, "England." And they said, "Oh, do they speak English in England?" And I said, "Yes." Mike King, really botching this intro. Mike King, he has 25,000 followers on Twitter, and you should follow him at iPullRank. His agency, iPullRank, is very well regarded. He's worked with Ralph Lauren and various big brands. He is the definition of a thought leader in our space. And you're about to hear why. Please give a warm Oklahoma City Confluence Con welcome to Mike King.
That was funny. He was like, Mike King, gave you guys the pause, and you were like, who? Good morning.
Good morning.
How's everybody? You good?
Good.
Awesome. So, I'm very excited to be here. I haven't been to Oklahoma City in 10 years. The last time I was here was to play a rap show at a place called the Conservatory. That's the only time I've been here before. And so, oh, it is?
Yeah.
Cool. And so, I got here at 1 a.m. last night. I have to get out of here on a flight at 4 p.m. So I don't get the time to really, hang out with you guys as much as I would like. But what I wanted to talk to you about today is technical marketing. And I have a tendency to go really fast just because I'm from Philadelphia and we talk really fast. Although that wasn't really fast. Just go ahead and grab this URL. I also tweeted it at iPullRank, so you can follow along. So I hope to be just as good as yesterday, and let's get it started. So this is the stock market as you know it. You think of guys on Wall Street yelling at each other like, yo, I want this for 25 points and da-da-da-da, or whatever they say. But really, when you think about the stock market, you think about guys like this, Gordon Gekko. Greed is good, Wall Street, the movie. Coincidentally, that's my office. That's my view from my office. That's literally the building that I work in. Who cares though? So really, this is the stock market as it is today. It's become something that's all digital, all computers, all on data centers. This is actually not even in New York. This is in New Jersey, right across the bridge in a small city where Ian is probably from called Weehawken. And for years, traders were just feeling like the market isn't doing what I think it's supposed to do. After the financial collapse, there were a lot of changes, and brokers would hit buy on a trade or whatever their bid is, and then it would come back and say, hey, that bid is no longer valid. Or they would do something and expect that the market would play out in one way that it didn't. And it wasn't until the flash crash of May 6, 2010 that people started to think, hey, something weird is going on here. What is happening? And so what happened was robots had more or less taken over the stock market. There's something called high frequency trading, which is algorithmic. And essentially, these robots react to the market and then cause it to then react further. So in fact, in the period since the financial crisis, the number of trades per day has more than doubled because of this. And so what happened was the SEC had put together this regulation called NMS. I don't remember what that stands for. But basically what it has allowed traders to do is front run using algorithms. And what I mean by that is they can figure out that you're about to put this bid up, and then they'll buy everything before you and try to sell it back to you. And so this is done, like I said, algorithmically, and there's been this overwhelming urge for stockbrokers to want to be as close to these data centers as possible. They do what's called co-location, where they put their servers right next to the stock exchange servers. And the reason why this happens is because this regulation has created a latency between when your bid goes in and then when the stock exchange receives it. Because of the fact that, let's say I want to buy 1,000 shares of HubSpot, and we have something like 13 stock exchanges now that you can buy them on. And so if the NYSE only has 50 shares, but it's the cheapest 50 shares, you have to buy those 50 first. And then you keep going around to the different exchanges to get the best price. So what happens is these stockbrokers are able to understand that you're trying to buy this for 50, okay, let me buy everything else and then drive that price up and sell it back to you. So that's how you do front running. Basically what they did is they growth hacked the stock market. And people like this made a lot of money from it. And people like this were like, yo, what is happening? I'm losing all this money. That was the forceful evolution of Wall Street. The same thing is happening in marketing right now. Let's talk about it. So this is where we're at in the adoption of marketing technology. We're still early in the game. People are still like, oh yeah, let me try this out here and there. Let's see what happens, right? And the thing is that marketing teams are not ready for this right now. There's a lot of marketers that feel like, hey, we have this marketing technology, we don't know how to use it. And so we're not maximizing these opportunities. A lot of people have all this software and all they're doing with it is email marketing. They're not doing marketing automation, they're not doing anything really cool that can be done right now. They're doing email marketing. You can do that with MailChimp. You don't need Marketo or anything like that to do that. And then when you think about it, where are we going? The Internet of Things is this thing that we're all talking about, but not that many people know what that means or how to capitalize on it. So once that shows up, how are you going to capitalize on that if all you're doing is email marketing with your marketing softwares? So it leaves all of us as marketers in a place where we're not ready for what's going to come next. And there's going to be people that capitalize on this, and we're going to be like, what is happening to my marketing? So we all agree that IoT is the next thing. All the thought leader people are like, yeah, this thing is coming. You got to get on Nest. You got to get your Apple Watch. You got to get your Apple socks. You got to get your Apple hats and all this other dumb stuff that'll be obsolete by the time you buy it. But nobody's ready for it. So you keep hearing marketers that market to marketers say, oh, technical expertise isn't something that we need. I saw this article, why modern SEO requires no technical expertise. Yo, I almost had an Ian moment. I was like, what? Who wrote this? And then it's some guy that I've actually worked with before, and I'm like, oh, he's just trying to sell shit. But the reality is this. With the JavaScript technologies that are becoming more and more popular, accessibility is becoming a bigger issue. So you might see a lot of sites these days that are using AngularJS or React.js and all these other different model view, whatever, frameworks. And so this adoption has kind of been exponential to some degree, in that more and more websites are using it because it makes a better user experience, makes things faster. And while Google has gotten a lot better at crawling JavaScript, they're still not perfect. And so it's more technical than ever to do good SEO. But the thing is, you run into so many development teams that are like, oh yeah, we can't implement that. That's going to take a long time. I have a client, a really big client, that has a systems team, and we said, hey, we want to do 301 redirects. They were like, yeah, we can't do that till 2017. I was like, really? Because I can just get in there and do it for you if you want. It'll take about 5 minutes. And they're like, no, we can't do that till 2017. And it's completely ridiculous because none of that stuff is that hard. I can tell you as a developer and a marketer, none of that stuff is ever that hard. Of course, there are some things that do take time, but not till 2017. And that's why growth hackers are killing us. It's because they're able to capitalize on these opportunities as soon as they see them. They're like, oh, here's a pocket of our audience that is performing really well. We can make something and put it directly towards these type of people and then make a lot of money. Whereas marketers are like, hey, I think that'd be cool if we did that. And then development says, well, you guys don't know what you're talking about, so we're not going to do that. But the reality is, the new normal is this. I don't want to use the word growth hacking because I think it's silly. It's like, again, marketers marketing again. It's silly. But I believe this is the new normal. Understanding the opportunities for development, understanding marketing, of course, and being able to play with data to uncover these things. So what I'm talking about, what I want to talk with you guys about today is how we can capitalize on these things together and grow as marketing. So how many of you guys know about AdWords scripts? Show of hands real quick. Okay, so more people should know about AdWords scripts. AdWords scripts are awesome. There are people that are programmatically changing their bids based on the weather. Let's say you sell umbrellas and you know it's raining in a certain geo. Okay, let's make it so automatically you spend more money and make more money. I don't know why that was so funny to me. How many of you have retargeted the wrong person or been retargeted before? That's a rhetorical question. I don't need your hands this time. Because we all have done it. We've all bought something and we're like, why is this ad following me around the internet now? Well, there's a lot of ways where you can make that not happen. Whether it's on the back end of your ad network or if it's just a couple lines of JavaScript that says, hey, this user has come here before. Why don't we not put this retargeting cookie on this page? But that's something that as marketers we may not know because we don't know anything about development. Or how about wanting to retarget one person? You can't do that, right? Because the way that retargeting works is you need a minimum cookie pool of typically 1,000 users to be able to do retargeting. Ad networks don't want you to be able to retarget one person. Well, just the other day we started working on this lead generation thing that we were doing where we wanted to retarget very specific people at very specific companies and give them a grade on their website and have their name be in the ad that chases them around the web. And so I said, why can't we retarget one person? There's got to be a way around that. I just need 1,000 people in the cookie pool. So I was like, okay, let's figure this out. And we did. And it works on Google, it works on Facebook, it works on Perfect Audience. Those are the only ones that we tested so far. But basically what we did, and don't tweet this, because I want to save this for like one of those conferences where it's like, I'm not saying that you guys aren't worthy, because that's what I'm telling you, but you know, there's like those conferences where it's like, give one tip that no one else knows. So I want to like save that one. But anyway, here's what we did. There's something called a headless browser, for those that don't know, which means it's a browser without an interface. And it basically renders the page the way that the user would see it. Essentially, this is what modern crawlers are built upon. And basically what we did is we crawled the pages 999 times and deleted the cookie every time. And then at that point, we have space for one more person in the cookie pool, and then that's the only real person in it. And so we're able to retarget on a one-to-one basis. And like I said, it works across all those networks, which is kind of interesting because it tells you that there could be a lot of impression fraud across those platforms as well. But anyway, I'm going on a tangent. Did you know that your ad networks are probably lying to you? And you would know this if you knew more about development. So this is an article on Medium recently where somebody was like, why is this New York Post page 10 megabytes when there's nothing on it? And so he ran it through his local machine so he could look at all the proxy data and all that stuff. That sounded ridiculous. He could look at all the data and all of the transactions that were going on the HTTP calls and things like that. And so he saw that New York Post was loading a video in the background that was 10 megabytes and basically forcing impressions for ads that you're never seeing. So that just goes to show you that your ad networks will lie to you and make you pay for impressions that are not being seen. And if programmatic advertising is scary to you, then you're in the very same position as those stockbrokers who are like, what is this algorithmic trading thing happening right now? Understanding this stuff as it comes out allows you to be ahead of the curve in all these different opportunities. So you might think with all the things that I just said that I'm going to tell you, you need to learn how to code. This is not about learning how to code. This is about understanding the possibilities that you have as a marketer with all this technology. This is about understanding what you can do to get around the limitations of your software or of your networks, of your reach to the target audience you're trying to go for. So the difficulty is that we still operate in silos. You know, your development team is here. Your marketing team is here. There's probably like some intermediate team that's like product or something like that. And nobody is working seamlessly. So you really don't know what people can do on the other side. You're just like, hey, can you do this? And they're like, no, you're creating more work for me. We don't know how to do that. So from my perspective, the marketing team should have a developer on it. You guys should have someone who owns the development for marketing, so you're not just trying to get tickets in with, some amorphous Wizard of Oz team that only comes out of their office like twice a year. So that systems team that I was talking about at my client, I've never met these guys. Like they're just sending these messages from some black hole where they only code and eat pizza, and you never see these people. And that's ridiculous. You can't get things done that way. So you'll hear that, this is a stat from Gartner, 81% of all big firms have a chief marketing technologist. Okay, so why do they all still suck? I'm just saying, you should probably hire somebody better. In the modern era for marketing, we are not just, your Don Drapers, who I heard Everett was like, what's his name, Don Draper? Don Draper is awesome. You need to know that guy's name. But anyway, we have to be both madmen and math men, and madmen and women too. I'm not trying to be sexist. Anyway, we need to understand how to be creative, how to understand the opportunities from a development standpoint, and also understand how to play with data in such ways that we can identify these new opportunities as well. And so, step one, stay curious about your technology. And again, I'm not saying you have to learn how to code, you just want to understand what can be done. So, the problem is that developers think of marketing as just liquor and guessing, right? Which goes very well with Don Draper, because that's exactly what he did for 7 seasons. But really taking the effort to learn more is what's going to change that perception. It's kind of like when you go to Paris and you try to speak French, even though you can't do it, they'll start speaking English to you as well. They'll be like, oh yeah, you tried, that's cool. But if you don't, then they're going to be like, oh, you silly American, you cannot. That was a terrible accent. So one of the things you want to do is stay up on coding trends. And one of the things that I look at on a regular basis is Built With. Built With is a site where they scrape the technologies that are being used across millions of websites, and they'll tell you what's popular. So if you see that all these new JavaScript frameworks are becoming popular, you might want to say, okay, what does this do? What does this allow us to then do if we use them? Another thing is you can look at is Hacker News, because the Hacker News nerds always be like, oh, check this new thing I made, this is great. Beyond that, also just stay aware of what your market is doing. So this is an example of something that British Airways is doing. Not sure if you guys can see it well back there, but there's a little girl pointing at the specific plane saying which flight it is right above her in this ad. And that's actually not that hard to do. There's APIs that'll tell you where flights are in positions. You know this is a fixed position. You can just say, what flights are over my position? In fact, if you have an iPhone and you take it out and say, hey Siri, what flights are above me right now? It'll tell you the same data that you see here. So this is not that hard to do. You just wouldn't think to do it because you're like, we don't know that this is possible. And so I also think that you should know your tools well. I've worked with a lot of big brands, a lot of small ones. The big brands have this problem, this disease called omniture. And every time a client tells me that they have omniture, I'm like, do you have to? And so the problem is that I've never once seen an omniture setup done the right way. And even more so, I've never seen a client that knew how to use their omniture setup the right way either. And so what I'm saying here is that don't just rely on these salespeople who are like, oh yeah, buy omniture because nobody gets fired for buying IBM or whatever the saying is. Really understand your tools so you can understand what you can do with them. And then also push those tools to the limit. So again, going back to the idea of retargeting, I'm like, okay, I know we can do this, but how? Where are the holes in this that we can exploit? It's kind of like thinking like a hacker. And then stay curious about your data. One of the things that I do on a weekly basis is just go into GA or MySQL or whatever and just play around. What do they have? What's going on? What are the trends? What are the things that we're noticing that are kind of anomalies in this data that we can then capitalize on? And then at that point, you'll really understand what's possible. So let's talk about the baseline of technical skills that your team should have, right? This is my team, or at least a portion of my team. We have 11 people now. I'm really excited about that. And everybody on my team knows HTML, CSS, SEO, and Google Analytics, no matter what they do, including my account manager, who definitely fought me on it at the beginning. I was like, you got to learn HTML and CSS. She's like, why? I'm just managing relationships. Because you don't know what you're talking about if you don't know this stuff. But anyway, so that's really made things a lot easier because we can communicate with all types of teams for the things that we're looking to implement. And of course we do more than just SEO, but being that that's such a large part of our business, we want to make sure that everybody speaks those languages. So ultimately what this is yielding is this concept of this T-shaped marketer. So someone in marketing should have really deep knowledge in one or two things, and then also have working knowledge in a variety of things that they're touching on. So whether that's working knowledge in conversion rate optimization, HTML, CSS, SQL, things like that. So what we're talking about here isn't you becoming a developer overnight, it's just really having that working knowledge. Because the reality of it is, the cornerstones of marketing have not changed. It's still about segmenting these audiences, creating something they want, putting it out, measuring it, see what works, rinse, repeat. But how you can implement this and capitalize on opportunities has changed. So first thing you should learn, HTML, CSS, JavaScript. And this is like a weekend of you doing this, not like, oh my God, I gotta go back to school. This is like, let me look at all these different tutorials, get some working knowledge, and keep it moving. APIs, because there's just so much structured data out there now that you can leverage to create these cool experiences that, like the thing with the little girl in the British Airways. SQL is incredibly important now, because we're in this age of big data. Excel just doesn't cut it. Excel only gives you like a little over 1 million rows, whereas SQL you can more or less have any number of rows. SEO, everybody should understand what it takes to make a piece of content visible, because we're content marketers now, right? It's not going to work if people can't find your content. There's a great study on Moz the other day where they reviewed 1 million pieces of content, and they showed that most of it just got no links, no shares, nothing. Because it's not an if you build it, they will come situation. You got to make it actually work. PPC. You should understand how an auction works. Again, I'm not expecting you to learn AdWords scripts overnight, but you should be able to speak to the people that do so that you can put together a compelling case of what you're trying to do. Content strategy, we're all content marketers, like I just said, but if you're just like, hey, I have this infographic idea, let's throw it out there and see what happens, you're probably going to fail. Whereas if you figure out how to create systems and processes for useful and usable content, you're going to do a lot better because you have to think through how to actually make this work. And user experience. This plays hand in hand with CRO, because if you don't create the right user experience with the things that you're creating, they're just not going to work. And ultimately, you're just going back to doing expensive arts and crafts if you're not doing things that work. So measurement is incredibly important as well. I expect everyone on my team to really understand GA, of course GTM as well. But being able to put together an idea and then say, here's how we're going to determine what the ROI is really important. There's so many people that will tell me, oh, we don't know how to measure content marketing because that's not possible. That is complete poppycock. I'm working on my cursing, y'all. Anyway. And then data mining, that's basically a fancy way of saying I just want to play with data until I find something. And so, there's some frameworks that you can work within to make sure that you're finding cool things. But basically, you'll want to understand that as well, so you can find those pockets of your audience that are very performant that you are not really capitalizing on. And then optimization. It's what we do. We don't just make things, we want to make things work, and then we want to squeeze the blood out of the stone. So you need to understand how to create the right landing pages that are most effective. So here are the tools that go into your technical marketing toolbox. I just felt it in a moment, I'm sorry. So your tools really create opportunities that you can really create new workflows. And here's an example of that. we do content audits. We do them very in-depth, very comprehensive, exhaustive content audits. And it wasn't until we started using URL Profiler that we understood that we can easily pull both reading difficulty and a page value, a dollar value for every page. And so one of the things that we always do now that makes our content audits very actionable is we do crosstabs on those two data points. So what you'll often find is the pages with really high reading difficulty, the ones that are more confusing are the ones that generate the least amount of money. And so that quickly helps you identify some real quick hits for optimization where you can just change the language on a couple pages and yield more money from them. So that's an example of a tool creating a new workflow because we really just dug in and tried to understand it. And APIs have exploded in the last 5 years. There's just so much data, so many ways that you can create a new experience just from pulling data from two sources, putting it together, and then creating something new. So it's not always about how do we go out and run surveys on SurveyMonkey or how do we do a bunch of research. In some cases, there's an API with everything that you want, and you can just put them together, and voila, you now have a new experience. And so the marketing technology landscape has also exploded. You know, more and more people are making more and more mediocre tools for you to use. And the reality of it is there's not that much new stuff that is worth checking out. And so I'm going to give you the tried and true stuff that you can use and get your job done. And all the things I'm going to show you are freemium. So there's an interesting quote that I found that basically says that, you know, marketing technology to get more adopted has to be less about coding and more about drag and drop interfaces that everyone can use. And that's one of the trends right now. Tools like Optimizely, Unbounce, Personalize, all these other tools, Google Tag Manager, allow you to effectively do things without development support. So, MySQL, you should get this immediately. Like I said, having a million rows isn't going to work for a lot of things you want to do. But if you still want to use Excel, there's a plugin for Excel where you can use MySQL directly in there. So you can pre-process your data with SQL queries and then only use the data that you actually need right there in Excel. Google Analytics, I'm sure we all know this, but we should all learn it very well. One of the things that I run into a lot is that my clients have multiple solutions that overlap and they don't realize like, oh yeah, there are some things that Mixpanel does that Google Analytics doesn't, but most of the things that you're trying to get out of Mixpanel, Google Analytics does do. And so really understanding this tool and how you can effectively leverage it and also pipe more data into it allows you to really capitalize on understanding what your users are doing. For APIs, Programmable Web is a directory of APIs. You basically search by keyword and find what type of data you might be looking for, and it'll give you a list of those APIs that fit that criteria. GA Query Explorer. So, as a lot of us may know, we run into this problem with Google Analytics now that it does the sampling of the data. It doesn't give you all the raw data. If you use the API, you're going to get it directly straight from there. So what the Query Explorer does is allows you to set up API calls without any code. It allows you to quickly understand how you might want to pull data so you can use it in other places. And then Google Tag Manager, one of the best tools to come out in the last few years. They kind of advertise it as like, oh yes, you can do tag management without code. That's not entirely true. There's a lot of things you can do without code, but to really maximize what GTM can do, you should understand HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and the document object model. We have a guide on GTM, which you can have for free. I don't even want your email address, it's all yours. Clipfolio, I love this tool for creating dashboards. So again, one of the problems I have is that our clients will have a bunch of tools that they're trying to get everything in one place. And what Clipfolio does is it allows you to create dashboards from any data source. You can upload data, you can use databases, you can use APIs, you can actually even email data to the system and then visualize it. And it's only like $20 a month. Orange is a great tool for data mining. So I dropped out of school in computer science before I got to statistics. And so I learned it online a couple of years ago. But this tool has been invaluable for really understanding, or running data statistical models really easily with a visual interface. So it allows you to basically set up your model with a drag and drop interface. So let's say, for example, you want to do regression modeling, basically, or if you want to do k-means modeling and things like that. You basically drag a thing that says, here's the data I'm pulling in, here's the model I want to run, here's the output, and it just does it. Full contact, an invaluable tool for anyone who is collecting email addresses. You pass an email address to it, it gives you more data on that user, their name, where they work, their age, their gender, and this is really valuable, especially when you're trying to, figure out if a lead is qualified or not. We use this a lot when we're doing our persona building, because if a client has a mailing list, we just run it through there, and then boom, we can segment based on that data. And then a local web server. A lot of the things that you're going to be testing out for showing off to your coworkers are going to be able to be set up on your own computer. And so having a web server on your own machine is going to allow you to do a lot of the things that allow you to have like a prototype. URL profiler, which I mentioned, you can use this for crawling websites and doing any type of analysis like link research or content auditing, or also for your SEO audits. We find this very valuable because of the fact that you just set it, let it go, and then you get all the data that you need. And then MailChimp. I love MailChimp. I may have said something that sounded like I didn't love it earlier, but I love MailChimp. Because they have a lot of features where you can trigger emails. They are basically a really simple marketing automation solution in addition to just like a email newsletter provider. And so this is the centerpiece of a lot of the marketing automation work that we do. We just tie it together with other solutions like GA or something to do lead scoring. And it's a really effective way to set up marketing automation. Also, Zapier, is that how you say it? I feel like it's French, Zapier. I gotta work on that accent. Anyway, so it allows you to connect things without code. So, if you have two different tools that you want, if this happens, then this happens in the other tool, this is a great tool for that. And then Kimono Labs, if you want to scrape data, because there's, like I said, there's a ton of data that's available in APIs, but there's going to be situations where you want data from a website that there is no API, so you essentially would need to create one. And this allows you to do that visually. And then Mautic, a tool I actually recently found about a week ago. It's open source marketing automation. So consider this, you have HubSpot, that's what your company's using, or Marketo or something like that, and you want to try something out. But you don't have the access to do it because maybe your development team owns that or some other team owns that. What you can do with this is install it on your own local web server, set something up so you can then present it to your team and say, hey, here's what I want to do. It's not that hard to do, I just did it. And then Postman. So I mentioned APIs a bunch of times, and you might be like, I'm not going to learn how to code. How can I do this? Well, Postman is a tool that lives right within Google Chrome, which allows you to connect to APIs, just like we saw with the Google Analytics Query Explorer, where you can connect to the API without code and just see what type of data comes back. So then when you're working with your development team, you can say, hey, here's what the data looks like. Here's how we get it out. You guys just build this. And then Unbounce, I can't live without Unbounce because of the fact that we need to be able to spin up landing pages pretty quickly. That's always been a big problem in marketing because landing pages are something that are owned by your development team. But using Unbounce, you can do that with a drag and drop interface. Same thing with Optimizely. If you just want to run A/B tests on your existing content, your existing website, again, it's a drag and drop situation. And then continuing that trend of a drag and drop situation, you can actually do personalization with a tool called Personalize. Again, everything I showed you is freemium, so you can get started with this stuff today. And then Chrome Developer Tools, which is built in to Chrome, allows you to get an understanding of what's going on with your website. You want to understand why it's slow, why it's loading so slow? They have a tool for that within there. If you want to understand what's going on with your code, what section fits into what type of code, you can just right-click it, hit Inspect Element, it'll take you right to it. In fact, for those that are still using View Source, that's kind of dead at this point because of JavaScript. You want to use Chrome Developer Tools instead. And then WordPress, from my perspective, only CMS you'll ever need. Yeah. All right, so the modern marketing process looks a lot like this. You are a conductor. It's not really about you having to do everything. It's about you being able to tell everyone, here's the plan, here's how we do it in a really granular way because you've identified whatever opportunity it is. And so it's really about strategic planning. You know, there's this role in agencies called an account planner, which largely does this. They don't really know much. They know, well, a lot of them probably know stuff, but I've never met any that know stuff. They know a lot about trends, and they're like, yeah, I want to do this trend, but they never really understand it below that surface level. Whereas you will be the strategic planner that has a really deep knowledge of these trends and how you can make them happen, and then how you can apply them to your business. So you also have to be at the point where you can do enough of this yourself, because of the fact that a lot of people aren't going to give you. I saw Seth Godin talk the other day at Inbound. He was saying how everybody wants more authority, but it's difficult to get authority. It's really easy to take responsibility. So if you want to do something like this, you know, in some cases you're going to have to just make it happen, show it to people, and then say, hey, let's go with this. And so what this prepares you to do is get it far enough that you can get buy-in from something that people can actually see. So the process looks like this. We start from strategic planning, then we go to content strategy. What are we going to build? How are we going to build it? Then we get to that technical development. Okay, this is the actual building phase of whatever we're doing. Then we promote it, we measure it, we optimize, we rinse, repeat. So all those tools that I showed you